Hi guys, if you haven't known, my name is Alexa and I'm going to be sharing about my long-term experience. I'm just going to pick one long-term experience because I've had several and I don't want to confuse you with all the different ones. But basically, I'm certified as a health and physical education teacher. So physical education is where I did a lot of my long-term subbing. So I got my long-term subbing positions through the district. So I saw that there was a long-term sub position and I applied and then I got an interview. And then I think we had like 3 rounds of interviews and then I finally was offered that position. So with that position, I did get 30%, I believe it was 30% of the teacher's salary pay. And then I had health benefits as well. Those canceled once I was done with the job, unless I wanted to do Cobra, but I didn't want to spend $600 a month for that. So luckily I was able to have my husband, and so I was kind of like double insured, which was great. My initial thoughts from when I first got my first phys ed long-term sub position is I was so excited. I was so excited but nervous at the same time. I wouldn't say that I was worried, but I was just like, okay, now I feel like I have to be like on top of everything. Like I need to be really organized. I need to make sure that I like have class management in check, and I need to make sure that like I'm better than what I was in my day-to-day position, which having the day-to-day position really helped. And I lucked out because I was at the same school that I was doing the day-to-day subbing with. So I was with 9th and 10th grade students. So the first week when I started, I was building routines and setting expectations. With physical education, building the routines wasn't as hard. So each class, they would come in and I made sure that they had their own like little roster. And I don't know why I said little roster, but they had a roster where they would come in and I made sure that each student would check off their names. So that was just a quick way of me just being like, who's here, who isn't. And when they weren't here, if nothing was checked for a name, I would make sure that that student wasn't here and forgot to sign in, that type of thing. Majority of the times they were absent. And then they always had a warm up. So it was different each day depending on what we were doing. So for example, if it was a cardio unit, which we did for a couple weeks, I would have them get on a treadmill, get on an elliptical, and do that for 5 minutes. And then we would go and then they would do something else when it was time for like class to start. So with that routine, of course I verbally would say the routine, but also like I feel like phys ed is easy compared to like ELA or something, but it was just the same thing. So every morning they'd come in, I would have the expectations, always the expectations on the projector. They could see everything and then what their warm up was. So some days it was like doing burpees and doing other things or running a mile. So it depended on the day, but they always expected to have a warm up and they knew how important it was to do a warm up before working out and doing like the main exercise. So I connected with staff very well. I lucked out because I was an alma mater. So where I got my long-term sub position, I was a student there. So I actually had known majority of the teachers. And then when I was a day-to-day sub, I subbed like so much in physical education. And so I was able to know the routine of the teacher that I had. And then I also co-taught with her from like being a sub for one of the other teachers. And so I got to see her teach and stuff. So it was great. And then before my position started, when I started, I she had asked me questions during the summer, and her and I talked. And then right before school started, I was able to ask questions that I had, or we met for coffee and we just like talked about everything and stuff. And so it went smoothly that way. I understand that that's not everyone's experience, but meeting with the teacher, if you can, is really, really important. So my day-to-day realities. I had to obviously balance teaching, balance grading, and then of course planning. So we had 42 minutes of class. I would say I taught for like 35, 38 minutes. It went very fast. So again, when the students came in, they would do their attendance, right? So when they were doing the warm-ups, I was able to go to the computer, my laptop. I had a certain laptop with them and with the district, and I was able to click who was here, who was absent, whatever. That was great. On my clipboard, I had another like roster sheet, and I would go through at like 10 minutes left of class, knowing that the students did what they were supposed to do, they would get a 5. If they did half the work that they were supposed to do, as in like running the mile or whatever it is, then they would get like half the points. If they weren't dressed, that docked a point. Didn't have, if they needed a laptop for the day, they were docked a point. Stuff like that. Planning. The plans were actually done for me. However, what I did is, I'm also someone who's like, I can't just take a lesson from the day from like, be like, okay, today's October 8th. Like, okay, I'm going to do, this is what I'm doing today. Like day-to-day subbing, that was fine with me. Like I could do that, but because I was in there, I needed to know ahead of time what I was doing. So I stayed late once a week. And I went through and I just made my own lesson plan. It was literally the same lesson plan, but I made it my own as well. Just for me to like memorize what I was doing instead of being like, wait, what am I doing? What am I doing? It just was easier for me. And then grading. So students had 3 to 4 minutes at the end of the period to go get dressed. So that's why I said like I have like 38 minutes to like actually teach the kids, because like the warm-ups and the attendance and all that jazz. So they had 3 to 4 minutes to change, because then once the bell rang, they had 4 minutes to get to their next class. So during that time when they were getting dressed, I would get everything tidy, and then I would put in like Alexa 5 points, Leah 5 points, Sarah 5 points, Mario 5 points. And so that was like just an easy way. Like I said, I had the grades already there written down on my clipboard, and then I just transferred them to the computer when they were getting dressed. I definitely had to adapt to challenging behaviors. As a physical education teacher, we know that not every student is going to want to be in physical education. We know that sometimes girls have their monthly flow coming. Sometimes people are embarrassed to do a certain workout, whatever. They had those days. I would just pull them aside, talk to them, and say, hey, just remember you're getting 5 points. Some kids were on the border. I had some kids on a C ready for a D. And it was talking. It was a lot of motivating.
A lot of motivation.
But for the behavior issues, it really was like at this age, it was more 9th and 10th grade. It was more of like lessons being learned. There was nothing that was like totally bad in class, but like maybe skipping class. That was definitely one. I did have to give a detention for that several times, different students, but especially because I saw them in the hallways, like coming into work, and I was like, oh, hey, so-and-so, and then they skipped class. So I was able to like talk to them and just be like, a human about it. Like, why did you skip class? You know, and they're like, you know what? I wasn't ready. I didn't have my gym clothes. Okay, well, you still show up, you know, just having a conversation with them, but also just being like, okay, you knew the rule here. So detention or whatever scenario it was. Wins and lessons learned. So it was really hard to know that I was making a difference with teenagers, because teenagers just sometimes stare at you and you're just like, so do you understand? Like, are you good? You know, but what I really enjoyed at the end of the class period was all the students were like, thanks, Mrs. Watts, have a great day, you know, and the relationships that I built with the kids, I think really like felt like a win. And when I would see them outside of school, which did happen, they would be like, mom, this is Mrs. Watts, this is my phys ed teacher, and you know, and I'd be like, oh, hi, you know, like, and give the student a compliment to their parents. Like, it felt good. It just felt right. Something that surprised me as a substitute long-term sub, I felt like I really wasn't surprised because it was based on what I studied in school. I think really what it was because like I was teaching, right? Like I felt more like I was the teacher versus like the sub. So it really was like focus. I was like, wow, I really like, I knew that teaching was hard work, but wow. And I really had to learn to balance my life outside of work and balance my life with work and exercising and keeping myself and my mind clear so that I was able to be there for the students. Okay, so a mistake or a tough moment that I had. I feel like I had a bunch of them, you know, especially with your first long-term sub position. I've made mistakes so many times. I don't know if there was anything that was like major. Sometimes the mistakes were like, I forgot to send in the attendance and I was like, oh crap. But for the most part, I would say it might have been in like a teaching style. So for example, I had to teach how to use the squat rack. And I think that was like, physical education, they have a way with words. And the cue words are really, really essential for students because there's form. They can get really injured and hurt. And so it's a liability issue. So I feel like some of the mistakes that I made, not necessarily no one got hurt, but I would say on my cues, on ways that the students could have learned a little bit better if I said something in a different way. I think what saved my sanity in my position was, so we had a ton of kids. And I'm not just saying 25 kids. If I had 25 kids, I would jump for joy. I think the most I had was like 36 kids in a physical education class. I was going to say room, but I was like, we're kind of everywhere. And so one of the challenges that I had to get over and like learn on the fly was separating them and making sure that like the students weren't on their phones and doing what they were supposed to be doing, walking around and stuff. And so my sanity definitely was reaching out to the other teachers and just asking their tips. How the hell do you do this? There's 36 of them in a small room with like 20 bikes. There was one where it was like they had rowers. They had, oh my gosh, ellipticals. They had like the air bike thing, and they had treadmills. I feel like I already said treadmills. And then they had like, with the treadmills, they also had the ones, oh, I hated them, where the kids, you would run and it goes according to your pace. Oh my God, it was so scary. But I had to learn how to shift them to each thing, and all 36 students. I was like, but my sanity was definitely asking for help and asking for tips when I needed it. At the end of my assignment, so I wrapped things up with a day of like fun. She let me do whatever I wanted with the kids. She made up the lesson plans, but she was like, you know what you're doing. I want you to be flexible with this. I want you to be creative and have fun with it. So the last day, what I did is we just did like a fun game day. They got to pick what they wanted to do and stuff. And then when she was coming back, I did like a welcome back sign for her. And I had the students like just write a positive message to her, like, I'm so happy you're back and stuff like that. And really just sat the kids down and just saying thank you so much for trusting me to be your teacher. And you guys taught me so much, you know. And then at the end, they all were like, round of applause. I was like, oh, thanks. Like, I didn't think I deserved that much, but it was very like heartwarming feedback. And now, like I said before, I was in a position where I was at my alma mater. So I knew the guy who was the chair department. He was actually my phys ed teacher when I was in middle school. And then when I was in college, I would come home and I shadowed him a couple times and stuff. And then I was a para at the same school, and I would talk to the phys ed teachers there. They all of them except for the one that I was subbing for, long-term subbing for, I had known. So I always got feedback, and I always made sure that like I was doing it appropriately. I never wanted to do something inappropriate. Obviously wouldn't do anything inappropriate. But for example, what I mean by that is like, if I didn't know how to express something, like what I said earlier, teaching how to do the squat rack, I had to learn. I actually during my planning period, I actually sat in another guy's class and observed him and his cue words and how he did it. And that's how I learned. So the feedback is amazing. When you are able to get the resources and get the help, do it, because it's going to help you benefit for the students. It's going to be amazing. My experience really influenced my teaching. I got a job within that school. However, I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, somehow stumbled onto YouTube teaching substitute teachers to be really good substitute teachers and be confident in themselves. But yeah, so I really, really enjoyed my experience. Okay, so advice for others. I would say confidence. I know that I stress that enough on my channel. I know that when I talk about substitute teachers, I say I want you to walk in with confidence. That is the key. Whether you had an interview and you have your license and you need that confidence, or you have an emergency permit and they ask you to do a long-term sub and you get it and you're like, there's no lesson plans, and like confidence. It's just, and going with the flow. It's just something that you got to do, and just trust yourself, trust your gut. You will do very well. So any encouragement that I can give you is take care of your mental health. Your mental health comes before the students. Hard to say because it's always like, well, we're teachers, we're educators, we're people who work with kids. Kids come first. No, your mental health comes first. Always, always, always. You need to be sleeping well. You need to be eating well. You need to be seeing your friends. You need to be doing things outside of school. All the planning, get it done when you can get it done. If it's a Sunday activity for you, great. If it's you stay late, great. But have that work-life balance, and you will see a huge difference from when you if you ever experience burnout, you'll understand. And long-term subbing can be a great way to get your foot in the door if you are looking to be a teacher. And it honestly really helped me. And with the feedback that I got, with being creative with the lesson plans and all that jazz, it paid off. And I know it will pay off for you too.